We are back with another episode of Mission Control, the Bellwether Enterprise Podcast. I'm the host of the show, Ryan Dentscheff, and for this episode, I sat down with Laurie Morfin in our Irvine, California office. She's the Senior Vice President who does business in Southern California. There's always so much going on in the real estate market in California, and for this episode, we talk about one topic that's seemingly constantly in the news, rent control. Laurie also breaks down a recent balcony law that has been passed in the state and talks about what it means for both property owners and tenants. I want to take this quick opportunity to remind you all that all Mission Control episodes are filmed and recorded and can be viewed on the Bellwether Enterprise YouTube channel. And in addition, they can all be subscribed and listened to audio versions on your favorite podcast platforms such as iTunes, Google, and Stitcher. So now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into that conversation with Laurie Morfin. So yeah, we want to talk a little bit about what's going on in California so far as like rents are concerned, because that's kind of making the news and is a heavy topic that's kind of everyone's really talking about and all things like that. And then we'll talk a little bit about some other laws and the balcony law that's kind of impacting things in the multifamily space as well. So I guess just jumping right into it,
Sure.
if you can kind of just talk a little bit about what's going on with the rents in California right now. Like I said, we're hearing it on the news. There's some recent bills that have gotten some action with the legislation and things like that. Just what is overall kind of the marketplace looking like so far as rents are concerned in that space?
Sure. Well, there have always been municipalities or cities here that have had rent control. San Francisco's had it forever. LA's had it. But the state just implemented a statewide law that says that you can't increase rents more than 5% plus the local CPI. So what we're seeing is that it's really probably 2.5% on average for local CPIs across cities. So it's saying landlords can't increase year over year rents by more than 7.5% to probably 9%, depending on what city you're in. And right now we're doing a deal in the East Bay of San Francisco out in Pleasant Hill, whereby they're doing a value add and we're running into that. But really, all in all, it's not scaring anyone too much because 8% rent growth is okay. We're really seeing more 2 to 3% rent growth in a lot of cities. So I think everyone's starting to get their hands around it. And the fear is that over time that becomes more stringent. We've seen that in Portland when they recently did a rent control law there at 7%. But everyone says, okay, we can live with 7%. But what happens now that they've passed the law and they want to lower it to 6%, 5%, 4%? Then it begins to tie the hands of the landlords. And that's where you get the fear of there being landlords that just aren't going to do repairs because they can't get rent increases and things such as that.
You mentioned a little bit that it's not really scaring anyone away. Kind of what's the action, the market looking like? I mean, is it still flourishing or is it slowing a little bit with the new laws, or how is it overall looking like in that regard?
Good question. I would say it's still flourishing, and it really comes into play on value add deals where a landlord rather wants to go in, buy the property, renovate it, and increase market rents. They have to get the tenants to move out in order to get the unit back to renovate it. And so if their hands are tied on how quickly they can increase the rents, it may take them longer to turn that unit. And that, I think, has always been addressed by any landlord in California, especially where they already are dealing with cities who say you can't go in and raise rent 15 to 20%. I mean, you're going to displace the teachers, the firemen, the service workers, right? So our clients really have been dealing with the political side of rent increases in California for years. I mean, we're very much a state that wants everyone to be happy and we don't want to displace people. And our clients have been working with those municipalities off and on for a long time because it is very political here, as everyone knows, as it is in a lot of places, but especially here. And they don't want to upset the apple cart, if you will, in the bad public relations. No landlord wants that. So we've been dealing with that for long enough anyways.
How is like the occupancy? We always hear about how expensive it is to live in California and, this area of, Southern California in particular. Like, how is the housing market so far as like occupancy and people being able to find affordable places to live, especially like you mentioned, some of the teachers and things like that? Like, how's the finding places to live part of it, I guess?
Well, the occupancy is still very high because there hasn't been a lot of overbuilding in most of our markets. That being said, affordability is still a huge issue here, especially up in the Bay Area and parts of LA. It's just, we're looking at deals that are $5 a square foot, whereas in most markets, to compare it for those who don't look at rents by the square foot, it can be $1 to $2, but even $1 in a lot of the Midwest markets. So $5 a square foot is very much a New York City type of rent, and San Francisco outdoes New York City sometimes. So affordable housing is still very much elusive in our state and many other states.
So far as the financing side, kind of where your perspective and Bellwether's capabilities and things, is there any particular products or things that you're looking at able to kind of use and work with to help make loans happen and deals get done, or is that not really that much of a challenge overall, I guess?
What the real challenge is out here with low cap rates is getting the leverage that people want, based on the fact that it can be buying a property at a 3 to 4% cap rate, which means that we can only get to 60% loan to value when they're asking for financing. We are seeing more clients use debt funds to do bridge loans to get them up on the LTV on their acquisitions, and then they'll flip to a more conventional Fannie Freddie permanent type of loan or life company permanent loan after the fact, just again in order to drive the initial financing.
Another thing we wanted to talk about is the new balcony law that I believe was passed in September of last year or fall of last year, something like that.
It's very recent.
Yeah,
for sure.
recently enough, and I know there's a few years where there's some window of where you have to get all your inspections done, things like that. I guess if you can kind of just briefly go over what's going on with that law, what it all means, I guess, and then we'll kind of
Sure.
get into a little bit of what it means for the whole big picture of the properties.
Yeah, and that happened in California, and we actually just recently found out about the law and informed some of our clients who still didn't know about the law. So I think it's very much new to everyone out here, and there are still some folks that don't know. So we've been doing a lot of research onto how that's going to affect our deals going forward. But in this particular instance, it came up on a value add deal that we're doing with a debt fund, and there's a lot of upside in the rents, and that is also where the rent control question came into question for that deal, and how quickly can we get tenants to move. But as part of that, you do a property condition assessment, and the engineer came back to us and said, we're including $300,000 in years 5, 6, and 7, $100,000 each year in order to account for this balcony inspection law. Again, we didn't know what it was, so we did some research, and he explained to us that by 2025, everyone who has a multifamily property with 3 or more units and has balconies or any structure that comes out of the building outside of the 4 walls and is above 6 feet above the ground and has wood components to it will need to get that inspected. And he didn't know for this particular property whether it would require repairs or not, so he randomly assigned $100,000 per year, which can have a big effect on our underwriting from a replacement reserve standpoint. That being said, we've checked with some of our engineers that do a lot of our agency business. They're still getting their hands around it, and I don't think they'll be randomly assigning a number, but it just goes to the point that in California especially, we seem to be having regulations coming out. This one was due to 6 students at UC Berkeley that were on a balcony, and it collapsed. There were many more students. 6 were killed and 7 were injured, and I think there were several more, as I said, on the balcony. So California, that was in 2015, California passed a law that said even if your property is new, within 6 years, you're going to need to have that inspection done, and it will roll every 6 years.
And you mentioned, kind of still getting your hands around everything that is going on and what it's really going to mean long term. But kind of what's your initial reaction to now that you got a little bit more information and understanding of how this is all coming together? Like, what is some things that you think it might impact down the road, or so far as like financing or the development or things like that? What's kind of your outlook at this moment on
well, for any deals being signed up right now, when we do property condition assessments, we do it 2 years beyond the loan term. So if you're doing a 10-year term, we're going to do a 12-year assessment. Obviously, the 2025 will start in year 6 of that. And either the engineers will have to provide an estimate of what they think will happen, or maybe some of our clients will just start preempting that and doing their inspections now to make sure they don't have an issue going forward. Because if they want to sell the property, I think as we get closer to 2025, that buyers will have those inspections done because they don't want to be surprised with a, $300,000, $500,000 type of repair, especially if the property's larger with over 100 balconies.
Yeah, and like you even mentioned, it kind of goes back to like the rent issue and how that's going to kind of get built into the cost of things, and it could just have a large impact on the whole market, I guess.
Yeah, and we're still 6 years out, so we can always lobby to change that law in some respect, but I think people need to start getting the inspections done before we have a real feel of what we're dealing with here.
Right. Gotcha. All right, well, is there anything else you kind of want to add on our conversation? I think we had a pretty good discussion.
Oh, I think so. It's still great to do business in California. We just have to keep our eye on the regulations and the rent control and if that will be changing and how it affects our deals going forward.
Sure. Well, hey, thank you very much for sitting down with me. We'll have to do it again next time I'm out here in California or
absolutely
wherever
anytime.
we cross paths. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ryan.